Well, welcome to the Busy Working Show. Frank, we're so glad to have you here. And tell us what you do professionally.
Yeah, I run a networking organization. We create groups of referral-based networking organizations around the country. These groups are made up of entrepreneurs, sales reps, professionals that meet weekly to, well, learn about each other, really develop relationships and pass referrals.
Excellent. So how did you find yourself in this side of the business?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'll give you the short story. I live in Columbus, Ohio. I went to Ohio State, got a law degree, got an MBA, started my career in public accounting. I was a tax consultant. It was a great job. It was great pay. It was great everything. I just didn't want to do taxes for the rest of my life. And so I left and went into private practice, the private practice of law. And the funny thing happened to me when I went into private practice. And the funny thing was nothing happened. I had no idea how to get clients. This is the mid 90s. There's no email, there's no internet, no LinkedIn, and attorneys aren't supposed to call people. So how are you going to grow a business? So I would go to networking events and really kind of make an ass of myself. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, we've been there.
Yep. Yeah. So, we know that guy. I was that guy, Paul. Somebody suggested, a friend from law school said, you should look into getting into a tips club or a leads group, like a BNI. Many people are familiar with that. Well, BNI was not in town. There was an organization based out of Pittsburgh that was here. And I went to a meeting and learned about it. It made total sense. I could lift up my whole world by just helping other people. And so I set about doing that, did very well through it. At one point had an opportunity to buy it. And I did. And that was the early 2000s. I stopped practicing law and have become what I call a student of networking, learning how referrals work, learning how networking organizations work.
Very interesting. So what have you seen the shift from the 90s to now with the rise of things like LinkedIn and social media?
Yeah, it really hasn't changed how we build relationships. Trust is still built the same way that it always has. Obviously, we can do a lot more online. We can do a lot more training online. We can develop relationships with people online. 95% of our groups are in person. They have a choice. They want to be in person. Now, that's not everybody's choice, but the types of people we attract are the people who want to have that in-person experience. And again, it's not everybody, but it gives us an option. It's helped us in many ways. For example, in the Midwest, Northeast, where we have chapters, if there's a snowstorm, in the past, we've had to cancel meetings. Now it's like everybody get your butt on Zoom. And so we just we pivot in a hurry. So little things here and there have really helped us with learning, helped us with getting to know each other. I've got chapters as far east as Boston, far west as Phoenix, Arizona, and the people communicate and they learn from each other.
No, that's pretty amazing. So from the topic of legacy building and how legacy interacts with business, you've got a perspective now that is probably even more interesting because not only your personal experience of where you started and how you have arrived here, but of all the people you meet. So what is in your mind, how do you approach building a legacy in business?
Yeah, it is something I have really put a lot of thought into. I have a sister who's an attorney and she's retiring, and there's really not a lot you can do with a law practice because you have a personal relationship with these clients. And somebody who enjoys working with you is not necessarily keen on, hey, I know you've liked me, now you're working with Bob. Not to pick on Bob, but you get what I'm saying. It's like, I don't want to work with Bob. I like you. And so certain businesses don't have that luxury. And I think the networking organization thing similar in nature, that people want to kind of know. It's a know, like, and trust sort of an organization. So, I certainly wrestle with different ways of passing the business on. Um, and actually have been starting to meet with people. I'm probably 10, 15 years away. But I think there's never, it can never be too soon to start thinking about, passing the business on. But I mean, the reality is you can't take it with you.
Yeah.
So if I sell this thing for millions of dollars, I can't take it with me. So you either sell it or you either give it away or the government takes it. But that's the nuts and bolts business and financial aspect of it. I think the other piece of legacy is just leaving a piece of yourself behind. And breathing life into something and knowing that it's going to continue on. And to me, that's really important. Obviously, I want to be compensated for the value I've built. But I'm probably willing to take a little bit less if it's the right circumstance where I know my work is going to continue on. I know I won't forever be remembered. Nobody is. I mean, who's the 14th president of the United States? I don't know. I could look it up.
My nephew could tell you, but I couldn't.
Yeah, right. But you know what I mean? It's just like, and if you're over in Europe, they probably don't even know who the president was 2 presidents ago. So this whole notion of us being remembered is really kind of a selfish notion. I have a friend, Dr. Rob Bell, has written a number of books. And one of his books, he writes about planting trees you'll never see. Just doing and knowing that, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know I've done the right thing. And that's really where I kind of look at it. I will be forgotten, but I will have set in motion something, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important, because sometimes that legacy, well, most of the time, from my experience, when I talk to somebody about legacy, it's in hindsight. We're not actively thinking about that and what are we doing now and where are we going. So I have a question for you that is a little bit different. So you say you're 10 to 15 years off. If you wrote yourself a letter today to be opened to yourself in 10 to 15 years, what would you write yourself?
Oof, that's a great question. I would probably speak to the fact that, you've made mistakes along the way, but we all do. And those, but sometimes mistakes are the path we absolutely need to be on. I mean, if you look at Edison, right? I mean, he made a lot of mistakes, and we have the light bulb. And so all those mistakes fed to something. Just remind myself of this moment that it's, nothing is forever. Eventually you'll be, I know my parents, I know my grandparents. I never met my great grandparents, So we start to lose touch as time goes on. So, not to worry too much. And I think the other thing I would tell myself is, remember where I was when I first started doing this business. I was 35 years old. 10, 15 years from now, I'm going to be double that. And to remind myself that who's ever taking over behind me has the same passion as they're only human. They're going to want to do a good job too, and just trust that they're going to carry it forward. Yeah,
absolutely. So you're learning along the way. When it comes to being part of a community, and particularly in networking, I think this is even more relevant, but being part of a community and participating in charity and philanthropic endeavors, how does that align with, the way that you see legacy building and teaching others as you're networking about those principles?
Well, one of the things we talk about in networking is it's really about people come to networking. People say, I'm going to go network because, I need clients.
Yeah.
But then you soon realize that to be successful, it's really about the giving.
Mhm.
And if you focus in on the giving and doing for other people, the getting will happen. And you're just building good karma into the world, and it'll come back to you. And it's hard to explain how it's all going to work. It's not a mathematical equation, at least that one that I can understand. But you just set in motion things, and so it does play into philanthropic and charitable sorts of things. In fact, one of the questions I get all the time with respect to, how can I get myself quickly networked? And my response is consistently, find something you're passionate about and volunteer. Because when you get out there, you're going to be rubbing elbows with people who care about the same thing you do, and they'll figure out what you're about. Oh, you're a realtor? That's cool. I know somebody. But the people who aren't even passionate about what you're passionate about will see what you're doing. And they'll say, oh, gotta be a good person. He's so devoted to that pet charity or cancer charities or involved with the school or whatever it is. So I think they are, they're very intertwined. Well, when does your business day begin and end?
Oh man, that's a great question.
It doesn't, right? It just, I stopped and answered some personal emails today, right? I might doing business stuff later tonight. When my kids were younger, one's sick, I got to take them home, but then I'm working later. So our lives are so intertwined. It's not like it was at one point where you went to the office, you took the train, went to the office, you worked, you were there from 8 till 5, you came home, you had dinner, and it was just this complete separation.
Yeah.
We are tethered to our work. And I don't know, I don't necessarily think it's a horrible thing. So
yeah, there's a lot of opinions on that. And it's that work-life balance thing. But it is interesting because the number of people that I would admire or aspire to, they really do infuse it. And I would say they put more boundaries than anything else. Like they know when to turn it off and when to turn it on, without being obsessive, because anything obsessive is out of balance and not healthy in the long run. So yeah, that's been an interesting ongoing topic that I've also followed, of this concept of work-life balance. But so it's interesting you say, like, from the charitable and philanthropic involvement of the physical involvement, like going to volunteer. And I think that's something that's interesting because, some organizations do need the money side, but they also need the physical volunteer side. And that could be a variety of wherever somebody is in their career, where it might make sense. Early on, you might only have the time and the effort, and later someone might have the money. But how that balances in. Have you ever had those types of conversations with all the people you've met networking in your journey?
Yeah, I mean, it does come up. Yes, charities do need money, but charities also need expertise. Somebody coming in and, hey, let me get your accounting set up. Let me help you do some strategic planning. I think the smaller the charity, the more they value that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The larger charities, like, just give us a bunch of money and we'll pay for the people. Whereas the smaller charities don't have that kind of money, and they're more interested in, we'll take your check, but I really need you to help us put together this larger fundraising thing. So it's, and I've never studied it officially, but that's just kind of my sense, is that the smaller ones, the time is invaluable.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that, because I do have a client who we partner with on things of that nature. It's like, yes, we'll do a monetary donation, but then we'll bring in an expert to participate in shoring up an area of that charity. And it is interesting that you say the smaller ones are more open to that, because thinking about a handful of them, the larger they've gotten, the more reluctant they've been to accept that help, which is interesting because they desperately needed that help. So it's almost like they had moved into this false oh, we're bigger, so we don't need that. We just need your money. Whereas sitting down and having that expertise and that help probably would have given them a lot more bang for their buck.
Well, I think the reality, Paul, is that when you get to a larger entity like that, you have people who are getting a paycheck. And somebody coming in and lending their expertise could be threatening. Whereas the smaller entities, it's like, come on in. You know what? If you're smarter than me, great. You know, we're trying to serve a mission here. I'm not the small not-for-profit leaders. Like, I'm not making enough to be territorial about this. Help me grow it. So it's human nature.
And it may be, you know, going back to the legacy and how people consider building a legacy, whether it's for themselves or for their organization. And I think that oftentimes can be a block as we consider what we're doing with a legacy, is if we're just focusing on, oh, I've got to protect something right now, protect my job, protect my whatever domain we perceive that to be, versus having that, like you mentioned earlier, of if you give of yourself, that's when you get most of the things that in abundance come from giving.
Right.
And maybe that protective feeling is where you get less of that understanding of, hey, we're working together to build this. And maybe it's not, people don't call it legacy. Maybe that's not something that is just in our minds actively. I don't know, can you think of another term that somebody would be interchanging legacy with?
No, I mean, I don't know that a lot of people think about it that way. I had a conversation with the business guy yesterday, and his whole thing is he's trying to pull this little conglomerate together and sell it to retire while he's still in his 40s. And then what? You might live another 40 years. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
What do you do? You know, I don't know. But I think a lot of people think along those way. You know, I think if you talk to most self-employed people, they're the ones who are probably a little more prone to legacy, whereas the people who have jobs, you know, for them it's a paycheck, and for them boundaries are way more important. My wife has a corporate job. You know, the boundaries are important. For me, it's Sunday at 8 o'clock and I got a great idea. You know, I'm opening my laptop. I'm going to try and document it.
Exactly, because you may not remember it at 9 o'clock that night. I do that all the time. Yeah, that's interesting. So, well, so as we kind of move into looking further down the road, talking about the letter that you would write yourself, what do you see as some of the best things that can be done for that teaching of or prodding and helping people change their mindset, particularly if they're not necessarily entrepreneurial like maybe you and I are, but they can still make an impact if they shift their thinking enough? How can we help teach them that and give them some perspective?
Well, in the long run, that's really our only mission in this world, is to empower the next generation. And some people don't have kids, and it's still kind of their mission. The world hopefully doesn't end when we die. You know, you want to kind of push it forward. And you know, it's cliche, but leave it better than we found it, sort of a thing. And you know, I think I have 3 kids. I don't know if you have kids.
I have 6 kids.
Oh, well, hell, you got me beat. But you know, you think every day, I'm guessing you think every day about, okay, when I'm gone, you know, what's the wind I've put in these kids' sails?
Oh, for sure.
You know, and you think every day, you know, I tell people if I didn't get married and have kids, I'd still be living in the same little dumpy apartment, eating ravioli out of a can, right? But all of a sudden something shifts when you have, something where it's, it's kind of preordained that I'm going to be a trailblazer for these little entities.
Mhm.
And they're not so little anymore, and help them push forward and have a better life. There's never been a point in history where a parent has said, I know there's exceptions, but generally speaking, I want a better life. I don't want my kid living in a cave. We're gonna, we're gonna move out of this rocky, damp, musty cave, and have a hut. And it just kind of continues on to, my kids will have a 3-car garage kind of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think about that constantly. And that's really what, what drives me to learn more, to learn how to participate, to be better, and to be that example to them as well. So that way it's not, because I mean, we can think of legacy from an internal selfish perspective, from a, hey, what can I get myself as quickly as I can? And you touched on that earlier. Or we can, as a less selfish way of, yes, I can benefit from this, but how can I teach and leave something that has impact down the line? Whether or not we're gone, because it can be in retirement, how do we teach somebody else to participate in business in a more meaningful way?
Yeah. Well, but if you think about it, retirement is a product of the Industrial Revolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it really is. 2-week vacation at all. When you farmed, you didn't have, hey, we're going to Disney World. You didn't,
No.
you're right. And so we've kind of baked this into society. And I think the notion that people are becoming self-employed, willing to work, not necessarily around the clock, but to be diligent, working and not really necessarily worrying about checking out at some point. I think we're going to slowly kind of get back to that, because that's just, the United States has certainly had real opportunities after World War II, because Europe was in shambles. So we just kind of led the world. And the world's catching up, and that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. But there's only a finite amount of money and resources, and gone are the days where you had one person working.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right. So how do people get in touch with you and participate with your networking stuff? I want to make sure that we have some good access to that before we leave.
The easiest way to find me is, I've got a personal website, frankagin.com, FRANKAGIN.com. And that, my email's there, my LinkedIn, my Facebook. I have a content platform that it links to, networking-rx.com. There's a lot of free content there. The books I've written, it's all right there. So, my podcasts, everything.
Outstanding. Well, that's good. Well, Frank, I really appreciate you taking the time and chatting. And I think this is a topic that is well worth exploring in all parts of business and stages of business. So thanks for your perspective and your insight. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Talk to you soon.